Anya.
And I'm Maya.
And we're from the Santa Barbara Middle School Teen Press here with
Shannon.
Nice to meet you. So Shannon, what are you hoping to achieve with Mountain2Mountain?
Well, the idea with Mountain2Mountain is empowering women and girls in conflict zones. And the reason I'm at Youth Bike Summit is to look at how the bike is a vehicle for social justice and how it promotes women's rights and gets essentially a tool to fight all the things that women and girls need to stand up for.
That's great.
So how did the idea of Mountain2Mountain surface?
Originally started with the Persian proverb that is, no matter how high the mountain, there's always a road. And I chose to start working in Afghanistan, which is repeatedly ranked the worst place in the world to be a woman. So it's quite a high mountain to try to summit. And over the course of the last 6 years, it's been a variety of projects, never imagining that it would lead back to the bicycle.
And in an interview, we saw that you carry a silver beret from a woman. Can you explain a little bit about that?
Yeah, I was in the Kandahar Women's Prison back in 2010, and I'd been visiting many prisons and doing some work inside the prisons. And a young woman named Nuria gave me a silvery jeweled hair beret. And the idea that she, being in prison, would give me something, anything, was very powerful to me. And what happened out of that experience of being in the prison was realizing that the power of voice is really the most important thing that we need to focus on. These were women that I did not have an opportunity to really affect their lives. They're in prison. I couldn't get them out of prison. They shared their stories, and in doing so, I was validating, their story, who they were and who they came from. And I realized that that's part of all of us, that at our core, it's a desire to be heard. Yeah. And if we use our voice, then we have the capacity to create change.
Wow. That's amazing.
So what is like one of the best pieces of advice you've taken away from riding a bicycle, and like why do you ride a bicycle?
Oh, well, I think the best piece of advice is that there's that old adage that, to keep your balance, you have to keep moving forward. And I think that for me, the bicycle represents freedom. It's freedom that you feel when you're riding and the wind on your face, but it's also the literal independent mobility, and that the bike is a vehicle for social justice.
And what have you learned, or what do you hope to teach from riding a bike?
I think that I hope to teach that the bike is this vehicle for change, and that it is also an equalizer, and it's something that is so much more than a sport or a vehicle. It's green, it's community building, it's a tool for access to school, to medical care, and other communities, and that I think let's face it, we could save the world if everyone rode bikes.
Yeah.
So you said once that you wanted to be the change in the world. What does that mean to you?
Well, I think that if we want to see change in the world, it means that each one of us has a responsibility to stand up and kind of own that. And too often we're waiting for someone else to create the parameters in which we change. And really comes down to individual action is what matters most. So that means every single person, every single day, using their voice and standing up for what they believe in.
And what has been the most powerful or inspiring experience you have experienced since Mountain2Mountain?
The most inspiring experience. I think that really recognizing our common humanity, going to a country like Afghanistan where they're known for poverty, terrorism, oppression, this ongoing war, and realizing at the end of the day, we're all the same. Everyone wants the same thing. They want their families to be healthy, they want to have choice over what their future is, and they want peace.
Just to follow up on that, how has that impacted your life?
Oh, it's impacted every single dimension of my life. In realizing that when you go out in the street, a lot of times we're looking, kind of create our communities around what we know and who we are and kind of what we think our values are, and realizing that actually what our values are reflected back in every single community, regardless of diversity and class and race and ethnicity, age. All of those things, at our core, we are wanting the same exact things, and we need to maybe broaden our perspective of who we're mirroring back to and who our community really is.
Sorry. How do you think the bicycles will help to change social status and stereotypes toward women in Afghanistan?
Well, in Afghanistan, where women have never been allowed to ride bikes, it's literally at the cusp of this revolution where if women can ride bikes, they're literally taking back not just the streets, but they're taking back their rights. They're saying we are equal. We have the same rights as our brothers, and you don't have the power to tell me no.
Wow.
So women are considered second-class citizens in Afghanistan. Have they experienced resistance in all, and how they responded to that?
Yeah, the resistance that they've had has been enormous. And it isn't just the bike, it's that very nature of being a woman. It's because you're a woman or you're a girl, your gender means you are targeted in Afghanistan. So girls attacked walking to school, girls not allowed access to having a political voice. The bike is this interesting thing because we think of it as kind of, it's just a bike. Like, why is it such a big deal? And it's because it's independent travel, and because it means that girls can take back their freedom. It's highly controversial, and so they have rocks thrown at them, insults thrown at them. They're targeted. They're threatened, and yet every day they get back on their bike and they ride.
And do you think the women in Afghanistan will continue to use the bikes under social pressures and gender stereotyping?
I would hope that they would. I think that in the same way that girls who are threatened for going to school don't back down. I've met girls who have had acid thrown in their faces, they're permanently disfigured, that are back at school as soon as they're out of the hospital, and their family supporting it because they know that that's the only way change happens. And I think it's really important when we're talking about social movements, particularly in Afghanistan, but change doesn't happen by someone else leading the charge. It doesn't happen without risk, and it means that someone has to take those first steps. These girls are doing it every single day, and I think what we can do is share their story and inspire others to do the same so that there is a movement behind them, even if it's half the world away.
So when you went to Afghanistan, being a woman in Afghanistan, you obviously aren't from there, so you had more privileges than the women there. How did it feel to be part, just have more privileges than, and then see them not being treated fair?
It's a really interesting conundrum because in one sense I am allowed all these extra freedoms of being this hybrid gender where I have access and equality with most of the men in Afghanistan, but I also have access to the women. And seeing them, kind of my counterparts, not have those same privileges and knowing that that's a generational or two-generation sort of change is incredibly frustrating because you want to just drag them along with you. And what you start to realize, though, is that, okay, so I'm in this unique position where I get both sides of the story. So I don't just hear what the women are saying and not have a concept of what the access and the requirements of the gatekeepers are, and I don't just hear the men and their version and not hear it from the women. So being able to straddle those two worlds when they are so split and segregated means that I get to be their proxy voice. And what's been interesting is that in this upcoming generation of women who are now in high school and early college, they don't need a proxy voice anymore. They are using their voice, they're breaking the gender barriers, and they're revolutionary. They are taking that on. They don't need a Western woman to do that. And so you see that shift, and that's incredibly powerful.
And, we heard you had an art show in Afghanistan. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I created a life-size photography exhibition that I set up as a series of street art exhibitions throughout Afghanistan, which had never happened before. And the idea was that we could humanize and give voice to Afghanistan, not just to individuals, but that we could actually humanize an entire country and allow them to interact with the images that are taken every day from their country, but most of them don't see because there's not magazines and a proliferation of photography and newspapers like there are in the West. So the idea was, how do we use photography, street art, and a kind of a community experience to amplify the voice of the country.
Wow. And have you ever thought about using music to do that also?
There's so many ways. At the end of the day, the revolutionaries are the artists, the musicians, and the activists. But I have now seen in Afghanistan, it's also the athletes. It's the boxers, the cyclists, the women who are practicing martial arts. Those are the change makers. Those are the things that tie community together. They're the things that inspire. And I think when we can focus not just on the root causes of poverty, but we can look at what builds community together, then everyone else's work, whether that's building schools, training medical practitioners, everybody else's work thrives when a community is inspired and believes that there's hope.
Yeah, definitely.
So, out of all the things you've seen on your travels, how have some of the things like impacted how you raise your daughter?
Everything is lensed through my daughter Devin, and she's kind of the prism in which I measure my risk and what I'm willing to risk in terms of my physical safety, my financial safety, all these things traveling to Afghanistan. But also what I have seen is that she now has an insight into what I do, and that while her passion is not women's rights, her passion is saving the snow leopards who are endangered, she understands she has to take action. And so for me, what I'm trying to do is share the stories that I see and hear in Afghanistan with her and show her that everyone has a role to play. And if everyone looks at what they're passionate about and then tries to take action in that, then widespread change can occur.
Thank you so much.
You are so welcome. Thanks for having me.